too. Thank you for doing this. And I love that mug. I have that mug. Thanks to you
You
gifting
have
that
one of
mug to
these,
me. Yes, via
don't you?
Sendoso, no less.
Oh, yeah. We use the
I
shit
don't
out of some
have one of those.
Sendoso.
Where's mine?
You want one? Do you want this one or do you want the Yeti one? Ooh, hard to.
Yeti.
Well,
My wife's
I'll
gonna
text
steal
you.
it either way, so I might as well get the Yeti because.
All right, fair enough. All right, my action item. I got it.
Cool. All right, let's get going. So yeah, you two, some special folks on this call. Let me just set the stage. So we organized this event because I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, and I think you two are some of the smartest people on this topic, which is we, as founders or sales teams or go-to-market teams, you're just trying to use whatever resources are at your disposal to win. And an emergent resource or channel is your cap table. It's your investors, your advisors, these people outside your business that can help influence your pipeline. So the title of this session is GTMing with your investors. We're going to record this. We'll make it available. Let me just introduce you to jokers, and then we'll get right into the meat of it. Actually, I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Brian Murray. I'm partner and COO at Craft Ventures, also the co-founder of Cabal. Cabal's tagline is literally get more to your investors and advisors. I created it because as an investor, I noticed there were these patterns that were just unproductive or could be made better. And so we created this, this technology. Okay, with me today, we've got Max Altschuler, VP of Sales Engagement at Outreach, founder and GP at GTM Fund, also investor in Cabal. GTM Fund is amazing. They put on all sorts of amazing content. Early stage SaaS focused fund. LPs are made up of 120 plus GTM leaders. Max also, you probably have heard of him a zillion times, founder, CEO of Sales Hacker, author of a bunch of books like Hacking Sales, Career Hacking. And then we've also got Pete Kazanjy, serial founder, coffee drinker, closer.
What's up?
Napa wannabe. Pete runs Atrium, which is a proactive sales performance analytics solution. Craft is a proud investor of Atrium. He's also the author of Founding Sales, which is the go-to book for building sales teams from 0 to 1. And there we go. Of course, you've got it right there. And also runs
all my props here.
Also runs Modern Sales Pros, which I bet many of you on this call are members of that. So great group. Thank you two for joining. I'm excited to get to some bedrock here. There's some interesting topics. And I want to start with the most foundational, which is why should teams care? Why should teams care about their investors and advisors and working them into their GTM motions? And what makes this group of people uniquely effective at pipe gen, at conversion? Why are they different than an SDR or an AE? Pete, I'm going to kick that one to you to kick us off.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the way that I would think about that is like there's kind of two things going on. If you think about like what your investors, like where they come from, right? It kind of reveals to you why they can be so helpful. So one, if you're like, use Max as an example, right? Or use me as an example. Like I do a little bit of angel investing here and there, right? Not necessarily at the scale of GTM Fund, but like oftentimes your investors will be investors in other companies that look like, that either look like yours or look like potentially your ICP. Not necessarily, but potentially. And then the second thing too is usually when you get to the point where you're, doing private company investment, like maybe you've been around the block a little bit, you're maybe later in your career, you've been around for 10, 20, maybe 30 years in industry. And it turns out like you accrete, good contacts along the way. And so it's just like this hidden, like, pater load just kind of sitting there that's been like latent by like historical standards. And like as smart modern salespeople, like we're always in the business of like unearthing like new sources of advantage. Like literally I'm wearing a Zoom Info shirt right now, right? Like, so, 20 years ago, there weren't like databases of contact information like Zoom Info or, some of the more modern ones like Primer or what have you. And And so then like those became available, and like, great, now we're going to like use the hell out of that. And so historically, like investor networks and things like that have been like less available, but like not because they weren't valuable, just because like they were kind of a pain in the ass to access. And so to the extent that they're a lot easier to access now through, you know, using LinkedIn or kind of like smart workflow tools like Cabal, like you're just hurting yourself if you're not leveraging that.
I
Yeah,
think
low hanging fruit. I mean, you're talking about a common connection who's trusted by both parties, a company that's probably gotten recent funding. So, you know, if you want to go off the BANT stuff, they've got budget. They're early adopters. So, you know, other hypergrowth tech companies are typically, you know, on the right side of the whole crossing the chasm. They are the innovators. They are the early adopter. They are leveraging tech before many of the other folks. Your product is probably already built for them versus like having to go and build enterprise features of functionality. So, and like they know many other happy customers that probably look just like them that might have raised from other VCs that you can't get access to. So leveraging your investors to go into their portfolio to pick off folks that you can reach out to is just, it's making your job a lot easier. It's low hanging fruit.
And Max, Pete used the word latent, and I do think this feels like a new channel. It's not, it's been underexploited in the past. Max, do you have a point of view on what's changed? Has something changed? Like, why is this becoming more of a thing for teams today than it was in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think couple trends add up to that. One, it's more transparent than ever before to see, you know, which companies have raised funding from which investors. Two, I think investors now are doubling down on being helpful because the market has kind of flipped over the recent years. There's more VC firms than ever before. We have, you know, we as founders have optionality. We can pick which VCs we want to work with. So word's going to get around pretty quickly if you're just putting money into companies you're not actually helpful, if founders are counting on you being helpful. So I think that's actually probably one of the biggest things that has switched over the past few years. And I don't think that is going to be something that I actually think like the crazy bubble that we went through between like 2020 and 2022, there were a lot of like bad habits created and things like that. But I actually think this is like one of those things that has changed for the better.
It's not going away.
Is that like VCs actually now have to step up and be helpful in a big way, because like you do have a lot of other options now. All these new VC firms that were created, all these new ways of accessing funding like Pipe and CapChase and you name it, you actually have to go and be helpful. And that's awesome. Like everybody wins when that happens. So I think like that's another, you know, paradigm that has been, you know, or chasm has been crossed or created here in this whole thing. But you know, overall, I mean, it's just really easy for me these days to figure out which one of our investors has invested in which company. I can go to Crunchbase in 2 seconds and kind of triangulate, you know, all my ways into a company. And a lot of times the investor way is one of the best ways in because there is that trusted common, you know, contact or connection there.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another kind of key enabling technology there has been like we've done this a couple times, like raising money from like your customers or and when I say your customers, I don't mean like companies, like use Atrium as an example, right? Actually, Brian, my marketing team is going to kick my ass if I don't say this. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. Okay, that's what it's called. It's called data-driven sales management software, right? And it helps sales managers, AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers use metrics to improve team performance. Okay, great. So if you think about the people who care about our stuff, it's like VPs of sales operations, you know, directors of sales development, et cetera, founders, CEOs, et cetera. Cool. So we actually, when we raised our most recent round of funding, we actually ended up with like, I think we did an AngelList roll-up vehicle that has like 150 of those titles in the, you know, in that vehicle. And because like back in the day, if you were gonna like do that via paper with like your lawyers or whatever, like it'd be a disaster. You would never do that but now that they have these roll-up vehicles, and we actually did it with my last software company using Funders Club, but you can actually get a lot more people on the bus. And it's not like, you know, people writing $25,000 checks or $50,000 checks. It's a lot of people who are like writing a $5,000 check or, you know, a $10,000 check or a $1,000 check, but that's actually like really meaningful for them. And so like they're ready to throw down, but now you've got like all these cats you got to herd, which is a CRM problem, right? So like it like unlocks this opportunity, but now you got to like A, herd them, and then B, like activate them. And it's not the same as like, pinging your like most network GP from the VC fund and being like, who do you know at XYZ? And like they have an answer. In this case, it's like you ping your 150 people and you're just like, yeah, who knows the VP of sales at like, I don't know, Snowflake, and like 4 people are like, yo.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a group.
done strategically, like it,
Yes.
because that is the issue. Is if what if multiple investors have invested in one company? Well, which one has the better contact? Which one has the better inside knowledge of like how their sales operation works if you're selling sales software into the company? So it has to be regulated. Similar to any sales process. You can't just be like, oh, let's spray and pray all of our investors that invest in this company and intro from all of them, and then that's a bad first touch. Like it still has to be executed appropriately.
Yeah. We got to double click on this. Basically, you have this workforce that you need to manage. Pete, you said herding cats. There's a lot of people. If you're fortunate enough to do one of these roll-ups or just get a great cap table, but then you got to activate them, and they're not going to activate themselves. So I think that's definitely an important point. Max, one thing I want to jump back to, you said earlier about what this means for the ecosystem. I agree, 2020 to now was this just frothy period of tons of investment going everywhere. There's probably a lot of bad habits to your point, but this expectation that if you're going to invest in a company, you are also signing up to support that company. I think that is a very good thing for the world. It's basically like you are signing up because you believe in this company, and you better be signing up to support them.
Pete, as a multi-time founder, you feel free to add to this list or correct me if I'm wrong, but like companies want access to candidates, access to playbooks to do things better in their organization, and then access to customers. Those 3 things. I mean, like, would you say those 3 things are like the most major 3 things that you get out of investors? Is there anything to add to that? Anything I'm wrong about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like it kind of depends on who your investor base is. Like in our case, like we did this big roll-up vehicle in order to have amass this like killer network of people who know other prospects. It hasn't really been all that terribly helpful with respect to like hiring per se from like engineering talent or what have you. But yeah, and then probably incremental like follow-on capital or incremental investors for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is investment. I think there are some playbooks there. Fundraising is it's a science in my view, rather than, I think a lot of people think it's an art. And I think if you approach your cap table the right way, they can be like, they could turbocharge your fundraising efforts. We can kind of double click on that later. Okay, so let's start getting into tactical stuff. My question is, because this is a unique group of people, your cap table, who should be involved with engaging these people? So from the company's perspective, can the SDR be hitting up your lead investors, the partner at your lead investor firm? Can AEs, can marketers? What are your advice, your guidance, both as investors yourselves, but also as founders, on how to facilitate these workflows? What's appropriate, what's not?
I mean, I'm subject to a lot of these asks because I invest in a lot of sales tech stuff, shocking. And I have a pretty muscular sales leadership network. So what I see is a bunch of folks who use Cabal in this case. Sendosa is a good example. They're an Atrium customer. I'm trying to think of like who else that does as well. I get a lot of requests from Spiff. And usually it's like one of those things where it's like very targeted, like they already know that I know the person, or like, sorry, I'm LinkedIn connected to them, which can mean a variety of things. Right. But at least it's like, it's not nothing. Right. And it's like, yo, hey, you're connected to like so-and-so. We've got we're trying to break in over there. Could you help out with that? Or so-and-so, and we're kind of like it appears that so-and-so, and we're kind of getting close to the finish line with them. Is that something you can help with? But essentially it's like showing up with like a very contextual ask. And so the response to that is like, oh, okay. Like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, no problem. I can text them right now. Or it's like, sorry, man, that's like a LinkedIn connection. But the point is like, I'm never going to be grumpy about that. Because like and most of the time those are like account executive engagements. Sometimes it'll come in from like the CRO or the VP of sales or the founder or whatever. Like I kind of don't care as long as it's contextual and it's like I can execute on it within like hit forward and like knock it out really quickly. Like I'm not gonna be grumpy about that. As long as it's contextual, like there's a good rationale.
Interesting. I'm kind of surprised by that. Max, what do you think?
I'm super helpful.
I know you. Well, you're one of the nicest people I know. So Max, what's your POV on this?
Speaking on behalf of a 1,000-person company, do not have your SDRs reaching out to investors. That'll end poorly.
Yeah.
You'll
Concur.
start getting responses on that. Yeah, I mean, we have for the most part, Scott Barker is our director of strategic engagement. Will be like the POC that has Cabal set up, or the processes we used before that, which were kind of way more tedious. But we batch things on a weekly basis, and so we'll have the reps, raise those things to Scott. They'll fill out a little form, which kind of turns out some copy that Scott can just plug in to the investor ask or the intro there. And we do that for investors, advisors, partners, like folks that are connected to Scott on LinkedIn, folks who are connected to me on LinkedIn, types of stuff like that. So we do it for more than just investors, but we had to build a process around that, because you don't want you can't open up your SDRs and your reps to doing that. It's not scalable. I think maybe for a 20-person company, you can run like that if you've got very few investors. I mean, at this point, we've got, I don't know, 1 or 2 dozen investors in outreach over the years that we probably use this for. So it just gets tougher to scale if you have a system.
And also, like, the number of sellers that you guys have is like,
yeah, and the number of
bananas.
accounts, and then it's like it's nuts. So yeah, one point of contact works really well, prioritized by size of the accounts type stuff. There's also, like I said before, like a strategy that goes into it. So like, all right, well, we ask our investors who's got the best relationship there, and then we go through them for the ask versus asking all 3 separately, and then they all make an ask, and then it makes us look bad. Just because there is a trusted common connection there doesn't mean that you don't need to do your job. So there's a couple things there. There's one, like asking the most trusted common connection, not just all 3 of them at the same time. 2, your message to them has to be appropriate for that company, which is why Scott does the form and not just some batch like, hey, can you make an intro? I see you're connected type thing. But like, you should send the note that they can forward along that is going to be easy for them to make that ask. And it's not as simple as just like, hey, you invested in us, so you think we're a good company. So that means by simple math that you think another company that you invested in should also think we're a good company. Like, that doesn't work. Who do you want to reach out to at that company? Why is it going to be a fit for them right now? You still have to put that tailored message, and that still has to be on the rep that owns the account, that they bring to Scott and Scott brings to the investor. It's not Scott's job to go and figure that out. It's still the research job to go and do that as if they were sending the message directly to that VP that they're trying to get in touch with.
Yeah, we like I think Sendoso is probably like the best user of this with me, because like we're huge Sendoso users over here, because like I'm a product marketer by background, so I love like good materials and good swag and kind of like stuff like that. And so this is why I love Sendoso so much, is because it just makes it so easy to like, send out things like this, that rather than paying Google like $200 for, AdWords clicks or whatever. And so like the cool thing there is like, not only do I have like a great network of contacts for Sendoso, not 100%, because like I'm not super networked with like CMOs and VPs of marketing, but like obviously Sendoso will enter through like VPs of customer success and VPs of sales and directors of sales development or what have you. But like they know that that Atrium uses the hell out of Sendoso, and like we're super pumped customers, and like do all sorts of like wacky stuff with it. So they know that like when they act, like they know that like I have a lot of wood behind the arrow there when I like, hey, can you like, even if I like, if it's a more tertiary kind of thing where it's like, hey, you may not necessarily know this CMO, but like, you're well known in industry, and like, by the way, you're really great, XYZ. It's almost like a customer reference request, but it's more kind of like proactive. And then of course, like we have all these, like, I mean, we have like Sendoso stuff like merchandise all over HubSpot and so on and so forth. So it's very easy for them to kind of like show what that looks like. So like, yeah, just like what Max is saying, you can't just show up and be like, cool, like we want to connect with like so-and-so, versus like, we want to connect with so-and-so. This is why they're very pertinent. This is why you'd be very pertinent, not just because you're an investor in us, but also because like you use the hell out of our solution. You guys are a match made in heaven. What do you think? Would you be down? Yeah, I'm down. Forwardable email shows up, forward it over, and like, ideally it's a match made in heaven. Good like investors SDR work.
Likening it to a customer reference process is probably the best analogy. That tracks really well.
Totally.
Yeah.
Actually, I pulled what I thought were like good and bad examples of this. So I'm going to share my
Mm.
screen and show you guys some quick artifacts here.
Oh my God, you're gonna like blow up some poor person who did it poorly, aren't you?
I obfuscated it so you can't tell. But okay, I saw this in an investor update. We love intros to marketing leaders at B2B companies. Please use our blurb
boo.
to facilitate introductions. Boo.
Boo.
Then here's a good one. This is
Yeah.
a different email I got. Hey, would you be willing to make an introduction to a specific person? Their
Right.
link to their LinkedIn. They had a
Yep.
specific reason why they wanted to talk to them. Then I thought this was the best part. They recorded a Loom video specific to that account. So now this person clearly put in the work to put a message out there that's worthy of a specific person reading it, rather than the investor having to do all the work to figure out who it is and where it should go and what to say. So I think there's a big difference between those two. Okay, Max. One huge topic that I've noticed with users of Cabal is a difference between the cold opener and the warm nudge. You guys probably have some inside lingo for these different types of references.
Oh, like opening versus like a mid-funnel,
Yes.
mid-funnel touch to kind of help with conversion. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So if your portfolio company is working an account, they already have like a pilot going on or whatever, and they're just looking for some help getting the deal over the finish line, versus they're asking you to make an intro, brand new, they've never heard of that company, the prospect's never heard of the company. As an investor, how do you think about the difference between those two requests?
As an investor, the warm nudge is definitely an easier one for me to make. I actually think it's an interesting, the whole question's interesting from like a sales strategy standpoint, like sales kung fu, because there's the like cold opener, the warm nudge, then the exec alignment is also like another thing. So it's like, well, there's the warm nudge, but then there's also, well, let's get the two CROs in a room together and have them talk.
Let's have some backslapping. Yeah.
We also want to invite them to an event, but like they're not responding to our marketing emails. So like, let's have, instead of making the whole ask around like getting involved in the deal cycle, let's have the ask around inviting them to the, San Francisco Giants box event that we have, and like
the dinner or whatever.
And then it's CRO to CRO through the investor, who like both of them know because they were in the board meetings and things like that. Like now you're like, I think there are different ways to play this game where you're thinking longer term, you're thinking strategically. It depends on like obviously the deal sizes and stuff like that, but like these are maybe land and expand things that you want to do. It might not be a warm nudge. It might be a deal that's closed and you've landed on 25% of the value of the account, and you're still wanting to get the other 75% of that. So I think like whatever the ask is, you still have to run a good process there and have a strategy like end to end with the deal in mind, not just say like, hey, this is like one little piece of it, let's just do this little piece and go do this little piece and then come back to the deal. It's like, no, how does this fit into the drumbeat of the sales cycle that you're running right now with this company? And that's not just like from when you start to when you land, but like that's from when you start to like the account is fully expanded and is successful over time. So I think you need to think through it holistically. And as from your original question, like from an investor standpoint, personally, I really don't care like what touch point it is. I really care that the company that's asking me to do it has a strategy that is well thought through, and that this is like a piece of that, and that I am putting like I don't have to do too much coaching on it, but two, like I'm putting my best foot forward in the mix. Like I would love to be an investor in the middle of a CRO from one of my companies asking another CRO to come to a ball game or something like that. If I know that
you look amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Right?
One, I think you're going to be getting a great product and something that you really need. Two, you're going to get a great experience out of it. And like, this is
I'm Max. I'm the box seat fairy. This is why you know me.
I rain box seats everywhere. This is exactly what I was put on earth to do. Just so you get a box seat and you get a box seat. So
no,
I don't know.
I think you can do the same thing with the opener too. Like, I mean, so this is why like we're very aggressive around like showing up with value first at the very top of the funnels. Like one way that organizations do that is with content, right? And so like we do that a lot. Like my marketing team, like jokes. They call me the dancing bear. Like, we do master classes all the time and so on and so forth. But it also shows up in terms of like physical assets and kind of like, work tools and whatever. Those things, so like you would use those on a cold prospect, right? Like our SDRs go outbound and they're like, hey, you're an SDR leader. Like, would you like a copy of Jeremy Donovan's Leading Sales Development and a Coffees for Openers Yeti or whatever? And people respond back and they're like, that's rad. I would love one. They're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, would you be open to a disco call? Yeah, I will now. So it like works really well. You can do the same thing at the top, like just because Max is the delivery vehicle or Pete's the delivery vehicle, that like top of funnel thing, they're going to, like, you should still show up with value, right? Like, I come bearing gifts, as opposed, like even in the example you were kind of pointing out there earlier, you can have a bunch of different contexts. Like, hey, there's ICP. I think this is why this would be valuable. Also, like, and we'd love to send them a, blah, 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 like, Yeti or book, or as kind of noted earlier, like we're having this event over here. We would love for you to join. Even if you can't join, we'd love to put you on the list for next time. That can really help at the top of the funnel as well, because it's the same sort of thing as like, oh, I'm the box seat fairy. I'm also the person who shows up with like, great swag or like great content or whatever.
Yep.
And events are great, even if people can't show up. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not in town at that time. Well, like you just got a touch.
No problem.
Yeah, no problem.
It's a give. It's a give, not a get.
Now we're in contact. Well, anyway.
Gosh, I guess you owe me a meeting then.
Yeah, we should catch up soon anyway. Oh yeah, I'd love to chat. All right, so like.
Yeah, I just threw 15 on your calendar. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. We've been talking about how these requests, they're kind of like pulls. You're pulling value out of your investors. But what's super important for teams not to forget is that if the investor actually facilitates a customer introduction, they are pumped. Like that's their value add, right? They're in a market trying to add value to their portfolio companies. So don't forget that they are motivated to do these things. Now, they're also in the psychology of spending social capital. That's why it's important to, be thoughtful about these requests to your investors. And for me, speaking as an investor at Craft, when I get a request to nudge a deal along and I already know that prospect is mid-funnel, it is zero. So I'm spending zero social capital on that. I only have upside because I can maybe just push the deal over the finish line. And I'm just hitting up my contact, telling them how smart they are to consider this product. Whereas to open a brand new work stream for one of my contacts to consider a new product, that's a bigger ask. But there's just a lot of psychology here and incentives.
There is, but let me share something that we did that's kind of like analogous. So when we were first doing research for Atrium back in 2016, Jesus Christ, so long ago, we interviewed like 150 VPs of sales and sales operations folks and what have you. And so what we did was like, it was just, like an open-ended product, research discovery session. It was like, hey, we want to ask you questions about how you use data to instrument your, to improve performance of your teams and so on and so forth. And so they would be like 30-minute long sessions, face-to-face, back in the day. And then what would happen is we would drop a $100 open table gift card on them right afterwards. But then what we would do is we would ask them, like if they were really smart, we would then go and ask them, like, who else is, hey, you're smart and handsome, Max. Who else is as smart as you on these topics? And like, you literally just delivered to them, like they just had a great discovery conversation with you where they got to complain about their current state. And you gave them a $100 or a $50 open table gift card. And they're like, wait a minute, does that mean that I get to be the open table gift card fairy now? And when I recommend like 3 other people. So when you're thinking about like, you can reduce that social capital friction by like showing up with something that's like super valuable. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like, a lot of high-end executives are like not really going to give a shit about like a Yeti or something like that, but it could be something else like, hey, we're having a round table with a bunch, like with 20 other CROs. That's going to make that person's like ears perk up. And so in that situation, Brian's not expending professional capital or social capital. He's the bringer, instead of this case being box seats, he's the bringer of access to a CRO round table or a fill in the blank.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's as simple as like, listen, if I don't know them that well, I won't say yes. And if I know them well, I'll give feedback to the company to try again if I get sent a message that like isn't going to land and isn't worth anybody's time. So, and
Coaching that you were talking about.
I'll be-
I
I'll
loved
be-
it. I heard you saying it earlier, like, it's great if I don't have to do that much coaching. And I was like, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I've had those moments. I know that you've had this moment where they're like, the rep is like, yeah, let them know. And I'm just like, oh, my sweet summer child.
Or,
That is
yeah,
not how
or
this
it's
works.
just like a very poorly written email with like no real
Yeah.
customization, and it's like, oh my god, like you're asking for an introduction to like CRO to CRO, and you haven't bubbled up any pain, you haven't done any of the groundwork yet. Like, you're not here yet. You're not here in the sales cycle to be asking for this introduction.
Yeah.
So like, go back, find below the line pain, bubble that up. Let me use that in the introduction, like, or whatever we're doing. Like, that's just one example, but or it's just a poorly written email to like the director person, whatever it is. There needs to be some coaching first, and then it's got to be good enough where I feel comfortable that, one, I'm gonna use that social capital, but two, it's gonna work. What's the point if it's not gonna work?
Yeah. I wonder, I don't know if I can't remember if Cabal has this like productized yet, but one of the things I literally wrote a document on how to like execute a Valley style business introduction, just because it was like so so many times, and like I didn't want to explain it to people, so I'm just like, yeah, no, here's this hyperlink. I'm like, hey, this is really cool. Can you facilitate this? Right. And it's like, instructions. So people still
But
fail based on that.
It kind of goes back to the point that especially when you're subscale, the founder should be facilitating these requests to their investors. It should not be the SDRs, who may not be the best writers. No offense, they're just earlier in their careers.
Yeah, it's just early. Yeah.
So that's
point.
important.
You could probably batch this into like employee counts, like sub 50, like,
Right.
That's right.
25 employees, it's the founder. Sub 100 employees, it's still like the CRO, VP of sales. And then like after that, it starts to get, okay, maybe there's like a POC or somebody. Maybe it's still them. Maybe it's still the CRO.
Kind of like a partner manager.
Yep. Actually, at the limit, I think this, when we were embarking on this with Cabal, I wasn't sure where it was going to scale to. At the limit, there are investor relations departments. Literally, there's whole departments for this.
IR teams.
Yeah, but they're financial focused. I think the future
back in
is
the day
that
they were.
Yes, I think the future is they should be more like GTM focused, like activating this group of people.
Well, we have a director of strategic engagement, which is like, so one, you were like, yeah, maybe partner manager. I think they should be titled director or above. At least look like they have some clout in the organization.
Yeah.
Stuff. If it's somebody low level, it's kind of like same level as a rep or an SDR. I do think that there should be somebody in the GTM org who's assigned, special projects like this type of stuff, that is just like purely on engaging the rest of the ecosystem, because there's so much value there. That person pays for themselves 10 times over.
Pete, you talked about the CRO roundtable invite. What I think a little trick that I've noticed, I call it the honeymoon period. This is right after you consummate a deal, whether you fundraise or whether you sign a new customer. There is a honeymoon period where everybody is super pumped on what you're doing or super pumped to be a customer. I think it's extremely important for founders, sales teams, to capitalize on those honeymoon periods. So for instance, at Craft, what we do is when we make a new investment, part of the onboarding is go through our portfolio, pick the companies that you think would be a good fit for your product, and then we'll compile an email and we'll send it out to everybody. And it'll in a way, it's introducing a new Craft portfolio company, but in another way, it's a sales email. And it's new information rather than a year into the relationship. It's not new. I'm clearly just trying to sell something if I'm forwarding a blurb. So
I would think about it as it's almost like customer success onboarding, right? So like usually this is so as the CRO at Atrium, I work on new business acquisition, expansion, retention, SDR, or sorry, like top of funnel as well. And so one of the things that ends up being important is like carrying the momentum through like the first 90 days, because like somebody's pumped, they've made their decision to buy, use Atrium as an example. We have a bunch of reps that are ramping. We really need to understand like how they're ramping effectively. We have no data on that. Oh, look, Atrium's really great for that. Cool. Like we have what we call our Atrium U process, Atrium University, where it's like, a 90-day onboarding process, et cetera, et cetera. Do the same thing with your investors. Because what you want to do is you want to prime them to have that habit.
Yeah.
Because if you lose that, right, if like you lose that golden window and you never have habituated them, like, oh, this is the company that gives me like good updates and then asks me with like very contextual asks, but instead like you show up in 6 months and you're like, oh, who are you again? Right. It's just like carrying that through can be very effective. Think about it as customer success, right?
Yep. Sort of like it's investor success, customer success. Both cases I think are super powerful. Max, is there a limit? I mean, I think you basically said you're always willing to do it so long as it's done thoughtfully. Is that true? Like if one of your portfolio companies sends you 20 asks a month, you'll just, keep going, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, if they're good and I don't have to do too much coaching. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially if it's like the good, like give to get situation, like the obnoxious version is the make it rain box seats or whatever. Like why would you be like, I think this is one of the things that folks oftentimes kind of like neglect is that think about what the cost would be to get in front of that person. Otherwise, like how much money are you going to have to spend on LinkedIn ads? How much money you're going to have to spend on Google ads, or like how much like SDR salary expense are you going to have to spend in order to get in front of that person? Okay, cool. So now take that money, I don't know, $300, $500, $1,000, like whatever it is, like depending on like your sales economics, and now bring it back and say, how can I make this like ask that Max is going to deliver? Like maybe I can put like $200 of $100 of value or $200 of value into that. And in that case, like Max is, he was making the Oprah joke earlier, right? Like like, and in that case, like you just go until like Max's network is exhausted or whatever. And, Max's network continues to grow. So
now let's talk it as like a very thoughtful founder. Like if she sent me 20 introduction asks that were really good, I love the product. It's super valuable for folks. Like I would totally send those along. Like I said before, I don't opt into ones for folks I don't know that well. Like I have to know them well, and I'll only send it if it's well articulated and a thoughtful, well put together email. So, I'm still pushing back. I'll send 20, but it might take you a little while to craft those 20. I'm not going to just send the first thing you send me if it's crap to this random person I'm connected to on LinkedIn but don't know that well. So
right. Well, I think an important point to founders is, even though you have great investors who are willing to make these intros, don't just fire off a bunch of unprocessed requests. Do the work before you send the request. Otherwise, you will. My experience has been if founders aren't thoughtful about these things, they'll start to be ghosted. People won't respond to them, and then that's hard to come back from.
Yeah, like you'll be that. It's kind of like it's the inverse of the you didn't do a good job onboarding. It's just like, ooh, you're like, oh, right. And it's just like, maybe I don't open that email, right? It's just like, oh man, is this going to be like another foot in the mouth email? Oh, great.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you don't want to be that one.
And or like the coaching might turn from like, hey, make this email better to like, hey, maybe hire somebody who knows how to do this. Like this is working for you.
Yeah.
So if you want to keep making these asks, like you either need to have somebody else write them or like bring on somebody that could do this better.
You gotta read the outreach chapter of Founding Sales, brah.
Yeah.
Here's the hyperlink. It's available online.
I think there's another element of that, which is load balancing. So spread these requests around your cap table. Like get everybody involved. Don't just lean on one person over and over because they're the most helpful. Try to activate. The more people you get activated on this process, the better off you'll be.
Yeah. Ideally, you can make it somewhat competitive too. You shout them out in the LP updates.
Yes.
Thank you to XYZ firm for 10 introductions and nobody else is mentioned.
I
swear to goodness. Yeah, totally. Like it's kind of like the look, I think I'm an angel investor in like, I don't know, like north of 100 SaaS companies or whatever. And so I get a lot of like investor updates and like 100%, like you just scroll to the bottom and look for the shout outs. You're like, am I there? Am I there? Yeah. Am I there? Who else is there? Am I there?
Well, I'll tell you
and you get an angel check and you get an angel check.
at Craft.
They were $25 at a time.
Those shout outs at a VC firm, the investor will share that around internally. It's like it's serious cred.
Kudos.
Those things are valuable.
It's capital.
Yeah. Let's see. We are at the top of the session. I want to ask just both of you, final question. War stories. So do you have any, I guess we've kind of gone through this, but is there any other anecdotes, stories of working with founders or working as an investor that you want to share with this group, sort of cautionary tales or things to kind of get right? Pete, you want to start?
War stories around like GTM with I think probably like my because this is a new motion, I think that like my biggest take there is going to just be like, be thoughtful about it. And what I mean by that is like kind of all the stuff that we're talking about. And I imagine like, I mean, you guys already have a white paper on this or blog post on it, where it's just like, cool, like go into your investors network, look for ICP, identify that goes into the message, say like this target is ICP because of this right here. If you are down to make this connection, we all know how LinkedIn connections are, so feel free to say no. Then I will send you something to forward along, because it'll be like super stupid easy for you. If you just do that, people will be like, you will already be like first percentile, like 99th percentile right there. People will be like, it's just like nail, like, because it's a new motion, people are like super awkward at it. It's just like nail that initially. And I think like you'll be way differentiated.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, we had somebody in the comments ask like, how could they do it if they're a senior account executive? Like, I would just go in and look at your current investors, go look at their portfolios, see if any of those accounts are in your book, and then take the initiative to go just write tailored emails for each one that you could bubble up to your VP or CRO and just say, hey, can we get these to these investors? I've already done the work. Here are the 4 companies. Here are the 4 emails that are all customized and ready to go. Can you facilitate this for me? I think this is a good way in. And, see what you get from there. And I think like if there's a thoughtful pushback, that's one thing. If they're just like, no, company's not doing good right now, we don't want to talk to our investors, and like maybe you should start looking for another job.
The CEO should be highly motivated to be selling at all times. So absolutely, I think if you're a rep, I think that's a perfect playbook, Max. I don't want to plug Cabal too much,
like,
but this is exactly what we're trying to help make.
Like if you're a rep or if you're a manager, I think like this is like one of our board members is a gentleman named Brett Queener. He used to run sales operations at Salesforce. He's like connected with like everybody, right? And so like my AEs are all like LinkedIn connected with him, and so like they can see if just like the CRO or the VP of sales or the sales operations leader that they're talking to is LinkedIn connected to Brett. They don't go and like ping Brett. They're like, hey Pete, can you like ping Brett for me? Here's the situation. Here's right? And like it's the same sort of thing. And so like they started doing that even in an informal capacity. Even outside of like the workflow that we have facilitated in Cabal.
Sales Nav, Crunchbase, Cabal, Outreach.
Sure.
Let's go. All right, guys, we're at time. First of all, thank you both so much. This was fun.
Good hanging out. Yeah, super fun.
For everybody who joined, we will be kind of summarizing everything we covered. I think, as Pete said several times, this is a new frontier and everybody's trying to figure it out. So let's all get smart about this together. And let's make this channel hum. So thank you guys for joining, and thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Max, enjoy the pool up there, okay? Don't work too hard.
I'll try.
See you guys.
All right, guys, take it easy. Bye.